So, from historical perspective, from academic perspective, Virginia Woolf would be looking at these three aspects of women. One, she would look at women in books, she would look at women in history, she would look at women in fiction, and then she looks at women in Elizabethan age. She chooses Elizabethan age, particularly, and the selection of this particular age, say for example, she could have said women in Restoration age, women in Augustan age, women in Neoclassical age, but she says women in Elizabethan age. And few reasons for that are, Elizabethan age is the most fertile literary age in English literature. It is, Renaissance preceded this particular age, and Renaissance was awakening. And one would dare say that Elizabethan age, where everyone was into writing, who could write nothing wrote sonnets, and who had little bit of skill would write plays. Plays and sonnets dominated this particular age, and you would find numerous writers writing, whether they went to the universities or they did not go to the university. In both the cases, they became writers. But there was no writer, there was no female writer from Elizabethan age. So was it that this awakening was not for the females? So here she refers to the woman in Elizabethan age. And she says, what is it that the woman of Elizabethan age was doing when all men were writing? There was Shakespeare who was writing, and there was no female Shakespeare. And she again says that the reason why Elizabethan age writers weren't female was because of the social circumstances, was the environment that was given to them. It was not conducive for writing. They weren't given rights, though it must be, we can say that it's an age of Renaissance, it's an age of awakening, but that awakening was for men, and that awakening was incomplete. Men though were awakened, but they weren't awakened enough to take their counterpart along with them. They continued to subjugate her and to flourish upon her subjugation. Following this, her idea about women in Elizabethan age, she says, that these women in Elizabethan age were not inferior. And to prove her point that they were not inferior, Virginia Woolf goes on to create a fictional character and names her Judith Shakespeare. And Judith Shakespeare is, has got no relationship particularly with William Shakespeare, because she calls Judith Shakespeare as the sister of William Shakespeare. In reality, there was no such sister of William Shakespeare named as Judith, but daughter of William Shakespeare was named as Judith. And here, Virginia Woolf creates a fictional story and tells us, what if William Shakespeare had a sister called Judith Shakespeare, who was equally gifted as William Shakespeare was, equally intelligent as William Shakespeare was, equally read as William Shakespeare was? What would have been the situation? Would it be that we would have a William Shakespeare, a female William Shakespeare? That could have been a possibility. But she says that it was not possible. Even if there was a girl, if there was a female who was as witty as William Shakespeare, as gifted as William Shakespeare, as read as William Shakespeare, as intellectual as William Shakespeare, still it was impossible for her to become William Shakespeare. And she gives reasons for it. She says that Shakespeare is not born in the working class. Shakespeare is not born on roads, in gutter. You have to provide environment for a person to become William Shakespeare. And look at William Shakespeare. When William Shakespeare decided to work in the theatre, he went to the theatre. When he wanted to become an actor, he became an actor. When he wanted to go and meet people in the street, he went in the streets and met with the people. When he wanted to read the chronicles, he read the chronicles. And when he wanted to write, he wrote. But these liberties were not there for Judith Shakespeare. If Judith Shakespeare wanted to join theatre, she would not have been allowed to join theatre. If she wanted to read books, her father would have told her, why are you reading the books? If she wanted to write, her father would have told her, what are you writing for? Who is going to read your writing? If she wanted to read the chronicles, she would not have been perhaps given opportunity to read. Instead, she would have been told, she would have been betrothed to a neighbor, and she would have been told to be obedient to him, to give birth to his children, and to rear up his children, and to look after his family, and just shun all creative imaginations if she ever had any. And the end result, she says, of this Judith Wright was that she committed suicide, because she could not tolerate this oppression of the society, because she says that modern psychologists may tell you what it is when your wish is not fulfilled. Her poet from inside would have been forcing her to write, but the society was consistently oppressing this poet within her. And failing to resist this, she would have committed suicide. And she says there could have been n number of female Shakespeares who have died and are buried somewhere in England, and nobody knows about them. Even male would not have known the reason of their suicide, why they committed suicide, but they would have. Again, what she is saying, that females have not been given proper space and environment to write, and then the males, the men like Arnold Bennet, dare to say that the truth is that females are not as creative. This is she says, an absurd way of judging. To judge, you have to first provide equal opportunities. Once you provide equal opportunities to both, there would be a case of judging and deciding whether females are creative or they are not creative. That was about Judith Shakespeare, the famous fictional character created by Virginia Woolf. In this particular book, she talks about various things, so she would have a commentary on Aphra Bhen. Aphra Bhen is again a name that maybe you have heard, there would be some who have not heard, but she is a female, writer from this 16th century, probably after Elizabethan Age she wrote. But she is the only female writer that you will have. And she says that why did she write? One of the reasons for Aphra Bhen to write was because her husband died. And once her husband died, she was forced to earn for herself. And she says she was the only woman who had the freedom of mind. Now again, see how she got that freedom of mind. Because there was perhaps no male or men around to oppress her, to not allow her to do what she wished. So as she got a slight freedom of mind, she became a writer. She gives, a running commentary on Aphra Bhen also in this particular book, A Room of One's Own. She talks about George Eliot, she talks about Emily Brontte, she talks about Charlotte Bronte, she talks about Jane Austen, she talks about how these, females wrote in an age, when they weren't allowed to use female name. You know that most of these female writers, particularly Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, they used, pseudonyms, because they knew that as females they will not be accepted. And she cites them also as an example to the females of her own age, that you should look at George Eliot, you should look at Jane Austen, you should look at Emily Bronte, you should look at Charlotte Bronte, how they, faced the odds and became the novelists of her age. Though she says that it was, a queer thing, a strange thing that these females chose to write novelists, because naturally she thought that a female should become poet. But she says that these 18th century, 17th century females, they were trained observers. So novel came naturally to them, so they became writers. That is another thing she touches in this book, A Room of One's Own.